There are days when the silence before the draft feels calm. To me, it feels like a trap. Because while a lot of people are looking at Los Angeles like the Chargers are just sitting there waiting to make their pick, I'm seeing something else. Pressure, opportunity, and a front office getting pushed toward decisions that could fast-track this team in a big way. Today, this thing is loaded. We've got trade-back buzz in round one, a rumor involving a major weapon for Justin Herbert, a strong read on the secondary, and a trade scenario that could reshape the future of this franchise. So hit that like button and stay with me because this just got serious. The Chargers are being viewed as one of the clearest trade-back candidates in the first round, and honestly, that makes sense. With only 5 picks in this draft, Los Angeles cannot act like it has room to swing and miss on day one and then just freestyle the rest of the weekend. This roster still needs volume, it needs depth. And more than anything, it needs to attack real weaknesses without panicking. The interior offensive line is still right at the center of this conversation. If Olavava Vega-Ioane comes off the board early, like a lot of people around the league expect, the whole picture shifts immediately. And it shifts because pick 22 stops being tied to one specific name and starts being about how smart the move is. That is where this Bills scenario gets interesting. Not because it is some obvious deal, and definitely not because Buffalo is about to hand anybody a gift, but because there is real logic on both sides. The Bills could look at an impact defensive player and decide to move up. The Chargers could look at their own board and realize dropping to 26 does not wreck the draft plan at all. If anything, it might actually clean it up. If the pass rush class stays deep and a guard like Chase Basantis is still in range without feeling like a reach, then sliding down a few spots and grabbing extra draft capital stops looking conservative. It starts looking smart. The part that jumps out to me most is this. People talk about trading down like it is easy, almost automatic, and it is not. Wanting to move back is easy. Finding the right partner, at the right price, with the board moving the way it does, that is a different story. And that is the detail that separates empty talk from serious front office work. Joe Ortiz does not strike me as the kind of guy who makes a move just to look active. If he touches that pick, it has to be because the read on the class, the needs, and the return really lined up. So when I look at this, my reaction is simple. If Ioane is gone, the Chargers do not need to prove anything to anybody by standing still out of pride. If the right deal shows up, the smartest thing might be attacking this draft with patience and walking out of it stronger than they came in. Now the temperature changes because this second story is not about fine-tuning, it is about ambition. Brian Thomas Jr. showing up in a trade scenario is already the kind of thing that scrambles the brain of any fan who understands what Justin Herbert could do with another serious weapon in this offense. And that is exactly why this rumor hits so hard. We are not talking about adding another body to the rotation. We are talking about dropping an explosive talent into a group that already has useful pieces and turning a promising unit into one that forces defenses to choose where they want to get burned. But this is where the conversation gets real. Nobody is questioning the talent. The issue is the price. Giving up a 2026 first-round pick and then adding a conditional pick that could get more expensive the next year is not a light move. It is not some cautious gamble. It is not the kind of trade a team makes when it is still trying to figure out if it wants to compete right now. That would be a statement. That would be Los Angeles saying it is done building this offense one piece at a time and ready to stack problem after problem on opposing defenses. With Mike McDaniel designing the system and Herbert running the whole thing, you can see why the temptation is there. Brian Thomas Jr. stretches the field, hits deep, stresses coverages, and changes the type of matchup Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston would get snap after snap. And honestly, that is exactly why I get the excitement, but I am not going all in without thinking twice. Because do the Chargers need another weapon? Absolutely. But they also need to walk out of this draft with more answers than questions. And burning that kind of capital changes the geometry of the whole roster. If the goal is to attack a real Super Bowl window, you can absolutely defend the aggression. No question. But if the cost drains other areas that still need help, the shine of the trade starts getting expensive fast. So my read is this. It makes sense as a ceiling play, as a bold vision, as a message from a franchise that is hungry. It just cannot be an impulse move. If Los Angeles goes down that road, it has to be because they truly believe that kind of weapon is the step that turns a good offense into one the entire league has to adjust for. This third story hits a part of the team a lot of people look at and think is already settled. I am not buying that comfort. The Chargers' defense was one of the best in the league in 2025. It held up at a high level against the pass, and it did it without needing a secondary packed with star names. But now the frame has changed. Jesse Minter is gone. Chris O'Leary takes over. And every time the voice changes on the defensive side, one uncomfortable question shows up right away. Is this group going to hold the standard, or does it need more juice to keep setting the tone? That is why the connection to Jermod McCoy stands out. If that projection is really on the Chargers' radar, I completely get it. McCoy has the profile of an outside corner with CB1 flashes, ball skills, opportunism, and the ability to make life hard at the catch point. The production he had before the injury shows a defender who attacks the play, not a guy just floating around in the background. The issue, obviously, is the risk. The ACL injury cost him a full season, slowed his development, and pushed a more complicated evaluation into this draft. And that is where the real question lives. How do the Chargers view that recovery internally? Because on paper, the fit makes a lot of sense. Derwin James is still the controlled chaos in this defense, but you do not build an elite secondary by asking him to put out every fire by himself. If O'Leary wants to start his run by keeping this defense aggressive, flexible, and ready to survive against loaded AFC offenses, then adding a high upside corner is not a luxury. It is insurance for the future. I know a lot of people are going to circle right back to pass rusher and offensive line the second they hear this name, and that reaction is fair. But dominant defenses need to be fed too. They need to be protected too. They need to get ahead of problems before those problems explode in November. So if the medical side feels good and the staff believes McCoy can make up for lost time quickly, this would not be some random detour. It would be Los Angeles refusing to let one of the strongest parts of the roster slowly slip just because nobody wanted to act early. And now this thing gets even more dangerous because this fourth scenario is not just about moving back. It is about turning one pick into two real shots to strengthen the roster in a smarter way. The idea of Los Angeles moving from 22 to 34 and adding 65 from Arizona is exactly the kind of move that could annoy people who get attached to the symbolism of having a first-round pick. But it could fire up anyone looking at this team for what it really is right now. Competitive, promising, and still in need of more guys who can actually help. If the Cardinals are truly willing to move up for Ty Simpson, the board starts tilting toward the Chargers. And honestly, I think that is really interesting. Because dropping from the back end of round 1 to the top of round 2 is not running away. It is reading the class correctly. It is understanding that this draft has a wide tier of players with similar value. And instead of holding on to number 22 like it has some magic power, Los Angeles could turn that slot into more depth. Emmanuel Pregnon, Chase Besantis, Peter Woods, R. Mason Thomas, Christian Miller, that range still gives you real impact names. And then 65 shows up too, which gives you another shot to attack a different need with real force. That is not a soft move. That is a front office trying to win more than one battle in the same night. But of course there is risk, and that is where the tension is. Because moving back also means accepting that you are giving up some control over exactly which player falls to you. You become more dependent on the flow of the board, the positional runs, and your own discipline if 2 or 3 targets disappear before your new pick comes up. But you know what? A team that wants to grow for real has to know how to play that game too. You cannot ask for a deeper, cheaper, more functional roster and then reject every move that requires letting go of the vanity of staying in round 1. So let me throw this to you straight. If this Arizona scenario is on the table and it brings back 34 and 65, are you making that deal, or are you keeping 22 and walking away with one name? Because that answer says a lot about how each fan sees the real moment these Chargers are in. At the end of the day, all of this points to the same truth. The Chargers have hit a point where they cannot waste reads, value, or opportunity. If this franchise moves back on the board, it has to come out bigger. If it swings for a major name, it has to be because it sees a real jump. If it adds to the secondary, it has to be to protect a defense that already learned how to suffocate people. And if it reshapes the entire draft, then it needs to do it to push this roster forward for real. I am looking at this moment like a statement window. Now I need you with me the rest of the way. Subscribe to the channel because the next moves from the Chargers could set 2026 on fire.